moderating.
Thanks
for you.
Yeah.
That's time. Therefore, welcome to everyone. It's a pleasure to have you here today for a very interesting research from also a Latin American citizen. That's very interesting for me. Felipe Bravo Pena is a Fulbright fellow and third-year PhD student of O'Neill PIA with an interdisciplinary background in veterinary medicine, epidemiology, agricultural economics, and public policy. He recently finished his fieldwork in the northern Chile's indigenous communities. Felipe has lectured and researched in the University of Chile and Andes Radio University, and consulted for the Chilean agricultural minister and international cooperation organizations like the Inter-American Institution for Cooperation of Agriculture, the Food and Agricultural Organization, and the German Cooperation. And we are very interested to see his research now in the role of agricultural knowledge systems on the environmental impacts. Normal rules for the new phases is around 20 to 25 minutes of talking, just clarification questions at this time, and then we start with the talking and discussions about the topics. Therefore, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Diego, and thank you everyone for being here. Well, my name is Felipe, and today I'm going to talk about this research that is part of one chapter of my doctoral proposal in this moment. So let's go. To start, a little research background to understand what is the problem here. Well, we can say that there's many different types of farming and agriculture, but we can classify them in an easy way in two big paradigms: the conventional and the sustainable agriculture. And under these two concepts, conventional and sustainable, we have a lot of additional concepts. But if we see the type of practices, probably we can classify in this dichotomy. I don't like so much this dichotomy because in practice it's not real. Farmers usually use practices from both columns. But it's useful to understand that in the right column, we have other practices for the environment than the practices that we have in the left. Obviously, a good practice is dependent on the context too. So it's not a strong definition, but it's a useful guide to decide on what side push the farmer. So it's in a general approach. The second thing that we need to understand here is we are in a context that we need to maximize the food production. We have a growing population in the world, but we have the same land, the same water availability. So we need to be more efficient. And that implicates that have more pressure to intensify the farming system. And historically, the smallholders are usually recognized as more environmentally friendly in their practices because they use more practices from the right column of the table. But now they are facing some intensification pressure and adopting more practices from the left side of the table, the left column. And that practices are usually associated with more environmental careful practices and with soil erosion, water pollution, greenhouse gas emission, and agrobiodiversity loss. So we have one big consensus and two narratives to solve it. The big consensus is that it's necessary to produce more in a sustainable way. And the narratives are from the conventional side that we need to improve the efficiency and reduce the externalities of the agriculture. And from the more sustainable side, we have the narrative about we need to transform the system, the farming systems based in agroecological principles. Surely we will need both sides and work in parallel in these two ways. And it's relevant to understand that the sustainability is not a dummy variable. It's not like somebody is sustainable or unsustainable, it's like a continuous. So our goal here is try to avoid that the farmers keep moving to the unsustainable side and try to push it more sustainable. And finally, this concept of agricultural knowledge system is a concept, it's a framework to describe how the actors, organizations, institutions have relationship. And the central assumption here is the actors are relevant in the generation of information and the flow and information inside this network, and that information shape some of the factors that push the farmers to more sustainable or unsustainable practices. This information can shape the peer effects between farmers, can shape, for example, the mental models that they have, and the decision of what type of practices adopt. So what are my research questions here? The big picture is like, how can the farmer social interactions influence the agricultural and environmental impacts? That's the general question. And the specific question are, what actors occupy more central roles in each community that I am studying? How does the centrality correspond to the type of sustainable or unsustainable practices? And finally, in what ways the network structure can be related with more sustainable or unsustainable practices? So in relation about my research design and methods, well, I did my fieldwork last semester in fall 2022. I have two target population or two groups of participants. That one is smallholder. I get surveys for 220 smallholder in the north of Chile, mainly indigenous people, using government lists. And after the government list calls, I did some door-to-door and snowballs in the territories, and interviews with policymakers, technical advisor, and key informants. I did 35 of them using official channels to contact them and some personal networks. So if you don't know where is Chile and where is Arica, you don't know either. Central America, and it's the northeast region of the country in the border with Bolivia and Peru. So have some influence from that, these countries. Well, Chile is a really long country. This is the northeast region. Mm-hmm. And to have some idea, this is the state capital, this is the sea. And the case studies are the 4 territories in the valley of Azapa, Coppa, Camarones, and Putre. And the interesting thing here is I choose these territories because they have some difference, but some strong similarities between them. So the comparison will be interesting. For example, it's the same region. That means that they have the same dependency from the agricultural ministers on the same budget, availability, subsidies, and access and policies. All of them are Aymaras, indigenous people from the north of Chile. So it's the same ethnicity in general. It's desert agriculture in that places. But they manage different watersheds and rivers. All of them have a different source of water for them. They depend for different municipalities. For pre-at-least municipalities, that means that they have different technical advisors or different extensionists helping them. And they have different biophysical conditions. This is a really warm zone. This is in the highlands in territories, for example. They have different productive paradigms. So these are more intensive farming system, and these are more extensive. So, well, and this is closest to the state city. In relation with the data collection, this is the objective here is explore how farmers make decisions, from whom they get advice, inputs, what are the social networks. I use the typical survey to collect egocentric networks data. That means I use some name generators and name interpreters to get the information. I use a multiple approach. That means that, for example, to get the social connection, I use more than one question. So I have different networks for that. For example, I get information about what is the cultural support network, for who they go when they have a problem, from who they get information, from who they get resources. So it's different type of roles of these connections. And it's multi-level network because I have information about the social connection, or for sales point, the market that they use to sell the products, and the organization of where they participate. So, yeah, additionally, I have some characterization data from each person related with socio-demographic information, farmer characteristic, type of practices, etc. Well, when you have, when you do some network analysis, you have 4 options in general related with the type of data that you use and the type of analysis you use. So in this case, I'm using ego networks to do a whole network analysis of the egocentric data. And probably in the other chapter of my proposal, I will use this approach of egocentric data analysis with egocentric data. So, and the key thing here is try to connect the dots through different techniques. So what's my analytical approach? This is my egocentric network. Is a farmer with their farm. They have some different belief systems and knowledge, and they are connected with different actors that interchange information, the extension need, input suppliers, and the sales point. And additionally, they have information or signals from the environment to make their decisions. All this information generate what type of practice the farmer choose. And depending on the type of practices, probably they can generate environmental impact or not. So in general, when we have ego networks, we don't know if one farmer is connected with each other. We just have the direct connections of each farmer. So, but we have here some common nodes, so we can connect the dots through that common nodes. What are these common nodes? The technical advisor, the organization they use, participate, the market they use, or for example, the river that where they get water to irrigate their farms. So we can develop this type of nets using this. And also we can connect farmers directly if we have some reasonable arguments to say that they need each other. For example, these 2 farmers are part of the same organization or productive organization, have the same technical advisor, they people from the same place, so we can probably connect them. But we are not pretty sure to connect these 2 because if they sell in the same market, that don't mean nothing in practice. So, what are my preliminary results? Well, the first one was, how I said at the beginning, what is a good practice is not obvious from each territory. So I define it as a set of sustainable practice in a participatory process. So in this process, participated 20 key actors from the territory, coming from the academia, from farmer leaders, policymakers. And the process was make interviews with them, have a set of proposal of practices that they think are relevant to measure. After that, get that practice for the interviews, and with literature review, do a proposal. After that, a ballot with that proposal to have a rank of what are the most relevant practices that they think are useful to measure, and to detect if they have some resistance on one specific practice or not. And after that, a validation workshop to try to present the proposal and make some adjustment. The output here was these 5 categories or criteria of the sustainability and a set of practices that is not relevant for now, but the importance here is I use this list of practices to develop the survey to decide what measure in the field. Regarding the valleys, if you can see here are different valleys in the landscape way. It's easy to see the difference. This is production really under plastics in general, in greenhouse production. This is in the middle of the desert. And these are some valleys that are just in the border of the rivers in general. So we have these more intensive valleys and more extensive here. So this is the result of the network visualization. We can compare each territory. The size of the node means the centrality. That's the number of connections that each one have. And the colors are the role that have each node in the network. For example, in Azapa, you can see the 2 big nodes that one of them is an input seller and the other one is the wholesale buyer. That's the market that they sell. So this is a relevant nodes here. And it's easy to say that in Camarones and Cotpa, the technical advisors, but the orange dot here have a more relevant role. And in Putre, you can see that the egos, these are the green dots, are bigger. So that means that the farmers have more relation or the connection between them. So if we take a look in this comparative analysis, some descriptive statistic, Putre is the more interconnected, have a stronger relationship between the farmers. This is like in some literature, say the bonding capital of the locality. They have more a stronger relation with organizations, and they have more average, more markets. And Azapa have this stronger relationship with input providers and have less markets or point of sales or sales point. So this is interesting because Azapa is the closest city to the capital. They have better connection. They have more population. So it's interesting to see that they have less points. And this is a second approach that I'm trying now, and I developed a quick indicator of sustainable practices using the use of pesticides and the use of fertilizers. So the outside, the outer edge color, this border, is like traffic. So it's red when they use bad practices, yellow if the practices are intermediate, and red if they use bad practices. So in this approach, it's easy to see again that Azapa have the worst practices, and we can see too that the farmers are with similar practices tend to be connected. So. Well, I have some insights from the qualitative information. I'm just gonna do a quick view here because the idea is try to use these networks information and take the qualitative data to give them some sense, some explanation that we can't see using the network approach directly. So until now, we can see that in this sustainable continuous. This ASAPA is the less sustainable, it is the more sustainable. If we compare, for example, this intensive valley, that it's ASAPA, it sees some reasons of voices from the qualitative study for the focus group or from the interviews. You can see, for example, this one is interesting that no one wants to be a sucker. For example, one farmer say that I invest 10 times more in cleaner products while others use a red label product that is banned in Chile, and they end up selling to the same buyers. So that's the ethical conflict arise. Why spend 10 times more on input to still sell at the same price? So that's, for example, a pressure that they have. Other relevant here is the belonging sense. For example, we must get to the point 80% of ASAPA Valley are renters. So renters don't care, they don't want, they do what they want. So it's different if we compare with the other places. So if you see what is the definition of good practices, for example, in ASAPA, they say good practices use pesticide properly. That is the idea that they have, for example. So this we have an insight here that the knowledge system that they have is different, because the knowledge they have about what is a good practice or not change. And quick view in COPA, for example, is Valley. For example, in the belonging sense, the farmers say, I have received a lot of guidance, even from the ancestral grandfathers. They were like my parents. I will ask them everything. So we have so many advice from them, from those who had ancestral experience. So I consider a valley a clean valley, not like others, for example, ASAPA. So they have this contrast. They understand that they are different in that sense. And about the good practices, the concept for these farmers, for example, the technical advice should open our eyes. They told us very clearly ASAPA Valley is overpolluted its practices, and that's with that word, overexploited. So, for example, the concept that they have about the fumigation is the fumigation kill the good bugs and the bad bugs, so the bad ones remain. So it's a different concept of information that happened. What are some ideas in progress? Just quick here. Well, one idea is develop some ecological nodes. So this land traffic border of the edges that I used in the previous approach, the idea is develop some direct ecological node. For example, this could be a river, and depending of the location of the farmers, the idea is try to see how they can impact the river. So I will develop an additional layer, for example, an ecological level network too, and try to generate this connection. The other working process is analyze each layer of the network separately, generate more quantitative approaches, econometrics and ergon models. I am working with Wes Zubrowski in this, and exploring more the qualitative data. So that's it. Thanks for all the funding that I did to develop this fieldwork. And of course, my big thanks is to the farmers that participate in this. That's my email, and these are some ideas to feedback to receive here. Any feedback is really, really appreciated. Thank you.
So Felipe, I'm gonna take the cue if there is any one. Well, I can start with something that we were talking. Well, the other thing about is we were talking about your ideas that in addition to publish your research and get the doctorate, which is your long-term goal with all of this research. Probably it's good for this feedback also.
Like beyond the academic view. Well, I have some personal compromise with these farmers to do some things. So I'm developing now a documentary to try to show the results of this research. Because in general, one of the more common comments that I receive from these farmers, they respond a lot of surveys every time, and they never know what's happening with the result of that or from what the people are using that information. Mm-hmm. So, and it's difficult because anytime that a new researcher go is most difficult get information or get participation. So my idea is do that, have this reciprocity with the farmers that participate in the process, and additionally generate some policy briefs for the institution that are part of the agricultural system in Chile, that is INDAP, that is the government agency that work with the farmers, because they helped me a lot to develop this. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed learning about the work that you're doing. Question I have, and you get to it in one of your citations with the Burton paper on good farmers, but I'm wondering if you see the good farmer literature being, I guess, more of a use for you as you try to develop this, considering what you found with the network and how people are, behaving and sort of the influence of social networks and peer-to-peer on the behavior.
Can you repeat the question?
I'm wondering if you foresee using the good farmer set of literature, the good farmer narrative, as a way to describe or detail what you're finding within the behavior of the farmers themselves. It seems like, there's a lot of influence of the peer-to-peer networks and the sort of social norm theory. And so I didn't know if like that good farmer literature, maybe it's something you haven't checked out yet at this point, but I'm wondering if you see that being a useful tool to explain more of this.
Yeah, we see the idea from the qualitative results about what they think that is a good practice. I think it is relevant. I talk with some farmers that say me, I just do the same thing that the bigger farmer do. So it's like if they use this type of product, I will use that product because probably if they are bigger, they know more. So the perception of what is a good farmer, my sense is different in each community. So probably we will need to develop, understand what is the concept that they have of a good farmer in each territory, and use that approach. We can frame it in that sense, but we will need to do that, to develop a good farmer conceptualization of each territory.
Thank you.
So,
I just want to follow up on his answer. You said each community is different?
Yeah.
That makes it hard to draw comparisons if every community sets up differently. You need a bigger sample size so that you might find communities that are more alike. I'm trying to figure out how you're going to analyze this if each community is totally different.
Well, my first approach is think that they have different actors that influence the knowledge that is available in the community. So this information is part of or shape what is the concept of good or bad behavior, or say something. So the idea is try to analyze mixing these results from the quantitative analysis related with the social networks with some additional focus group and interviews that I did. I conducted that research now, but I didn't analyze the result. But I know that I have some insight about the different perception that they have about it. So the idea is try to complement the both types and analyze or try to develop some explanation from the qualitative information to explain why they have these different perceptions.
So I would suggest something very different here. So I would start documenting. It could be quantitatively or qualitatively, exactly what are they doing. So essentially, what are the practices that they are implementing that have environmental impact? And then I guess that you can do that more qualitatively or more quantitatively, but I would start essentially with that, okay? And that means essentially you need to think about who are the decision makers. I would say the key players managing, it's a farmer in charge of managing a piece of land. And that will give you immediately, even for each valley or area, more observations because there are not only one farmer per unit. Maybe connected to Bernie's point, it's that they are somehow affected by similar variables, okay? But then at the very least, you have variation there. And then after you have that, then you start thinking on how you explain those differences, no? Because so far I'm not convinced that the network thing is either necessary or useful. So it's, again, most likely it is, but without a clear documentation of what we are trying to explain, it's very difficult to figure out exactly how you're going to explain things. No? So essentially, maybe I misunderstood, but what I understood is that you are trying to explain differences in environmental practices. That's what you're trying to explain. So let's start. I would like to see what are those practices, essentially. That should be section 1 of your paper and your presentation, I would say. What are those? Maybe you need to come out with a classification system. This is more pro-environment, this is less, this is more harmful, this is less harmful. That will force you to think about a classification system or something. And then at the very least, we are clear of what we are trying to explain. And then we see how the network, how other variables, geographic variables, how close you are to markets, the extension is, blah, 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 all explain those things. But you start with a description of what you want to explain, you know? So I would say that.
Yeah. Probably that was a problem of the presentation. Okay. Don't go deep in that. But yeah, I probably assume that it will be interesting in general because it's a really, we know what are the practices that they have in each territory. Okay. So it's not like the problem that we don't know why they have so different practices.
Can you briefly describe in each territory exactly what are the main practices so we understand what they are?
Maybe go back to the slide where you listed how you did the gradient of sustainable to unsustainable. Yeah, so these are the list of practices on the right.
Okay.
Yeah. So these are like suggested practices that some agriculture agency will try to promote in all the territories because are the practices that have some evidence that are useful to use, right? Are less harmful for the environment, have good results. So it's the type of practices that probably you will try to promote. So but each practice have more or less level of resistance for different reasons, right? Some farmers will have, for example, in some territory, a bad experience on one specific practice, and they talk with their neighbor, and that neighbor start to resist to use that practice. So in the territory, we have different reception of this type of practices. And probably in some territories, you have farmers really empowered with this sustainable agriculture and try to promote this. So
I think part of Gustavo's question is on the surveys that you did with the 220 households did you ask about each of these practices?
You asked the practices?
Yeah, on the surveys.
Yeah, the survey was developed after developed this. So I explored all of these practices in the survey. They use it or not. And why they don't use this practice, if they know the practice or not, and who recommend to them an alternative practice to this. For example, if the farmer use a bunch of pesticide, I ask, why you use that this type of pesticide? Who recommend it to you? And it's that are type of questions that are in the
So you have your outcome variables. So your outcome variables is essentially the practice that they are actually implementing. And you have some explanatory variables there to exploit. It's like, again, it's what kind of advice they get, and maybe the reasons that they're giving for one or another thing. From my perspective, that would be the starting point. It's like, can we see some map or something on, for 3 very important practices, which are the places that are, better in terms of implementing those practices or worse, something like that?
Yeah, I tried to do some quickly of this here. So the color of side of the dots are if the practices are good or bad. So I use here just 2 practices: use of fertilizers and use of pesticides. I have a big list, so I need to develop an index to decide, and that is longer than the time I had until now. So I just developed a quick index here using these 2 practices. And the relevance of the social network here is probably you can see that the good or bad practices are connected between the farmers. So we have communities of bad practices in the network. And the second step there is understand why these communities are different. And there is where I plan to use the qualitative data. So I can't use the qualitative data if I don't have this view of what are the relationships, because I can do, or I can conduct a more direct, for example, econometric model and say that this is sustainable and sustainable, and these are a bunch of variable control variables, and say each farmer or see what is the significant variables. But the theory here says that the decision depends of the peers too, depends of the network, depends of the agricultural knowledge system, depends of the institutions that they have. So for example, here, if the farmers have a lot of restrictions that pressure them to produce more intensive, and they have these bigger nodes that are input sellers, that have vendors, that have technical advisors that sell inputs, that pressure to the farmer to use more inputs. So that's the type of thing that you can see in this type of network approach.
It's endogenous. There are more benefit of using inputs there. So the inputs vendors are wherever they get more sales. So we don't know all that essentially.
Yeah. So yeah, it's part of the thing that we need or I will try to explore or understand in a better way. So.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on this point. So to the endogenous point, like the endogeneity is really the whole point of the network analysis. Like that is why you run the network analysis, because that's what network analysis tries to account for. It's accounting for the fact that there are peer effects, and so you want to map and explicitly do those, because not accounting for them leads to the endogeneity problem. So that's like, just for context, that's what like the goal is really here. In terms of, I will talk more later about this report. But I think kind of the question for you and for the audience is like, how can we visualize these networks in a way that gets at our analysis? Like that seems to me to be the big question of when you do network level analysis, especially for ego data. And so the suggestion I would make is in trying to think about communities. One, you probably shouldn't run a formal community analysis. But 2, what I think you can do is collapse your network by some of the shared nodes and get at community that way. So for example, you can map it and say, collapse it by organization. And then now your network maps all of the egos who are connected through sharing an organization. And then you can map what kind of practices they're using. Because then you might see that all the people using conventional are, you go into the same organization or the same market or same seller. And I think that tells the story that you're trying to tell and probably see in your data in like a really efficient way. And you can also model like peer connections and see everyone in this organization is really highly connected in their social networks or something like that. But I think that's the next stage for
yeah. It's one of the next steps or working process that I have is separate these layers, because probably you can get more explanatory power doing that. I just did disaggregated analysis, but time restrictions. But yeah, it's the next steps. Yeah, I agree.
You know, what struck me during your presentation, you gave an example of in one of the valleys where to use cleaner products was more expensive.
Yeah.
Yet, regardless of the products that were used to sell, to farm, they were getting the same prices from the vendor.
Yeah.
So it seems like you've got economically a structural problem here where you can't, where in the market for actually buying the food, they're not differentiating the practice and how it's bought. And I thought you also said that one of the products was actually illegal or prohibited in Chile. It's being used anyway.
Yeah.
So you've got an enforcement problem too. So in the governance structure, who's supposed to be enforcing? If there's a prohibited product, not supposed to use it, where's the enforcement mechanism for governance to enforce that in Chile? And that's part of, so it seems like you've got some additional structural problems beyond in addition to the social network nodes. And it seems like those are important factors. And I'm just wondering, how are you counting for those?
Yeah.
Because those can override. I mean, to the extent to which the economics are such that, hey, I'm going to get the same price for what I'm selling. I'm also use a cheaper product, right, as an input. What's going to override that? Or I'm actually using a prohibited product, but it's not enforced. What's the punishment? You know, those things, those factors can override the other things that you're looking for. So I don't know. It just seems to me that you need to take those into account in your overall governance structure or scheme to explain what's going on here.
Yeah. Regarding the markets, that's why I use these notes of wholesale buyer and point of sales, because the hypothesis is that this wholesale buyer don't pay pay just for commodities. So they don't care if the farmer are producing organical, for example, or ecological products, because they just buy by volume. So,
but what I'm trying to say is in a governance system, you can have governance systems where you could put incentives on the purchasers of the commodities to say, for example, if you buy products that are manufactured or, you know, put together this way, you know, this is where with federalism and stuff like that, when you have polycentricity, the fact that you might have certain rules or things that come at different levels. And the problem is if there's no enforcement. So even if you're using a product that's prohibited in Chile, but there's no enforcement mechanism for it, that's a governance failure. That's a system failure. Okay, so where's the pressure going to be brought? Is the pressure going to be brought on the purchasers of the commodity? You know, if people are going to be buying the input, the outputs from the farms, where's the pressure supposed to come from? So even if Chile has prohibited a certain product, what was the intended enforcement mechanism for it? And at what level of analysis? On the farmer itself? On the next level of the purchaser of the farmer's products? I mean, what was the intended system? It just seems like there's something missing here in terms of being able to understand what's motivating the behaviors of people. Yeah. So it may be an enforcement failure could be overriding what otherwise they might do.
Yeah, I think this difficult to enforce the rules is a big problem. I don't think it's the most relevant to explain the results that we have here.
That's an assumption you're making though.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying is by not looking into that, by saying, well, I don't think this is important, that's already an assumption. It's an assumption that you're making that you haven't tested.
Yeah.
And
I'm not saying that
taking that into account could actually indicate that there's something wrong with your analysis. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know.
You could actually have a factor that's overriding something else that you want to look at.
Yeah.
Unless you take that into account, or you make really clear up front, I'm not taking such, because from what I read here, I mean, obviously this is a shorter summary of it here, but until you said that during your presentation, I had no clue that they actually were using some prohibited sub products.
Yeah.
Where's the enforcement for that?
It seems like this is common. I mean, if you look at the organic grains and what's getting imported from Southwest Asia, it's a really common issue. And if you look in the US and talk to organic versus non-organic farmers, the same enforcement issues. That doesn't matter if it's in Chile or where it is. This is really a common problem on the inspection and enforcement. So it's not immune, obviously, to this place. It's
oh no, what I'm saying is though, but if you're not taking that into account and what he's trying to explain here, the thing is that can be overriding what these other forces of incentives.
Results are, yeah.
That's what I'm saying. So notwithstanding what, your neighbor, whatever is saying, or you're induced to keep using a practice that you might otherwise have changed from.
It goes back to the, social norm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it actually becomes, so that's what I'm just saying. It's a multi-level thing. So I was just trying to help flesh out. It just struck me in your presentation when I heard that. So that's why.
Yeah, no, I understand it. And yeah, I'm not saying that I'm not gonna look at that or that is not important by default. My opinion is just because the chemical fertilizer pesticide are cheaper if are legal or are illegal. It's the same situation. They always be cheaper and they have more access to this type of chemical products anyway. And in the other regions, we have the same situation than here, and we have better way to enforce the law. We have the problem here because this is a border region with Bolivia and Peru with easy way to transplant products. So yeah, this is part of the situation.
I think to Barbara's point, that if it's really, everybody just assumes that that's true, the point's still probably really important to consider, because if it's not enforced and it's just widespread, you just do it, like it's something worth addressing. Because if you can make that point, like everybody assumes this is not true, even maybe there is some spotty enforcement, but there's some reason why or why not it doesn't happen. It's still useful background to contextualize how people are playing the game, essentially, in that type of an analysis. The other thing that I think would complement that a bit would be thinking about why there isn't differentiation in the markets for the organic products. So that might be related to enforcement, might be related to the wholesaler just can't find enough buyers. Would be my kind of working hypothesis. I assume you have a better sense for those sorts of things, but I think it's worth keeping in mind.
Yeah. The question here is what's the driver? Is because the chemicals are cheaper, or because nobody is willing to pay more to get a cleaner product?
The chemical is cheaper because nobody in government wants to deal with the political mess that would come from forcing farmers to pay more. Like that would be the assumption I would make in the US for why a cheap chemical is still available. It's because politically it's a headache to enforce it. And I assume that seems plausible that could be the same thing in Chile.
Thank you.
Yes.
I have a question. I don't know if it is helpful, but the basic problem that you are looking at, how to produce more food. And I wonder if the problem is producing more food, or it's a problem of efficient consumption, delivery, or employment. And what I mean is that there is food waste, like globally, I think it's like 30%. In the US, it's 40%. In Canada, it might be even more. And even in Chile, there is food waste. A lot goes to waste. So if the problem is that people in certain area are hungry, maybe the best and even more sustainable solution would not be to produce more food, but to be more efficient on the food that we already produced and deliver it to them. And maybe even in those communities, there is a waste of food. If it's, it could be, so it could be an issue of more efficient consumption or better delivery of the food. But still, there might be a problem that even if you can send them free food, and they will be unemployed, they will not be hungry, but they will be unemployed. So it's, this is my question. I don't know if it helps in a way to.
Yeah, well, we probably always assume that we have a loss of food in the chain. It's like yeah, probably in for example in vegetables it could be a lot. I don't know. Let me see if I have a video here, just to show you something. This one. These are tomatoes that people just drop in the road in the production, because these tomatoes don't have the correct size for the whole buyer. So if they receive the trucks with the tomatoes and the buyer see small tomatoes, they can reject the whole truck. It's part of the reason that they don't risk and rather drop the tomatoes and yes. So yeah, we lost a lot of food in the chain, and it's a way to reduce or be more sustainable. So I think our parallel ways we need to try to approach. This is a thing that why I think the markets are very relevant to put in the equation of the analysis.
And I might maybe just add to what I said about different prices. I think different prices for products which are more vegan or whatnot, or that it's a lot of matter of the consumer if the consumer is aware. So it is less something that comes from the government, or it could be a campaign of the government, or you just have more hipsters in the neighborhood that want more vegan. So it's maybe less a question of governance and more a question of public relations or public awareness of the advantages of vegan products versus other.
Yeah, I think not always is black and white. You have some literature that say that the organic products can be more pollutant than the conventional agriculture because they have more cost of distribution, for example. So they contaminate and they generate more greenhouse gases. So because find vegans is way difficult that normal consumers that don't interested of that or on organic products. So for that, in these two narratives that we have about how to solve this problem, I think we need to take both. You need to produce more products cheap. No, everybody can pay, for example, for organic products or agricultural products, or go to a farmer market to do the groceries. So I think we need to take both ways. So.
On the number 2, the social network analysis, for all those different network shapes that the networks take, do you think any hunches or evidence as to if the geography or topography of the space is responsible for some of those differences, or in networks, or ways that social bonds form differently in each place?
I think it's difficult because in the meantime I'm exploring the data I'm discovering different things. For example, the big node that we see in Azapa, that is the input seller. It's not a big company. I have a video too to show you. So this is the big node, the input seller. And it's Don Patricio, it's Don Patrick. This is one. It's not a fancy place. It's not a big place, but it's in the top of the bus. So the farmers can take the bus and go to the place and buy his inputs and return in the same bus. So these are things that are like you never expected before that. Why is this node is relevant? And this is why. And the second thing is because Don Patrick sell fractions of products, not the complete thing. So the smallholder needs sometimes a fraction of the thing. They don't need a ton of, I don't know, of fertilizer. They need a small bag, and this guy divide the package and sell it in smaller ways. Expensive, but for the farmers it's better. So that's the type of explanation that the qualitative data arises from the qualitative data. I don't know. I'm exploring the data now. I think that some geographical things are relevant, but some visible social norms, I don't know, are relevant too. So yeah, those are the things.
It's like a transaction cost. I can ride the bus and get the thing I need. It's the norm. I had a couple of questions about results that I think you said, and I want to make sure I was curious what you found. But so I think you said in Putre, you thought that the farmer connections, the egos, were the like dominant sort of factor. Is that, but Putre was the one that's out in the desert, right?
It's in the highlands, isolated.
So
yeah.
it's isolated. So is it that when it comes to interpreting that, is it really that there is stronger farmer connections or there are fewer alternative connections? Or both?
Yeah, I think it's both. Yeah, I think because we can't forget what was the question that arised this network. The question was from who you get help of support when you have a problem in your farm. And they have technical advisors too. The same advisor that have the same extensionist system that have the other territories. So they rather ask to another farmer than the technical advisor that they have. That can mean something, and we need to explore that. Yeah.
We are arriving to an end.
So I could suggest that essentially, there are two ways of focusing if you are still interested in the environmental practices. And then one is to focus on explaining the overall adoption of environmental practices. And the other one is to focus on inferences across these four regions on adoption. And then this could be very, very different things. And then again, if you are targeting differences, you need to find things that are different in these places. Okay, it's very difficult to. So, for example, this could be a connection. You know, they can be divided in fertilizers, but they can be divided in other things that are useful for more organic farming. So essentially, this guy is in the business of selling things. So essentially, it will sell according to whatever market circumstances. So again, that they're all connected with this guy doesn't say anything about environmental practices in principle. No? So it's a...
Yeah. One of my idea is do a comparative between communities. That will be one chapter of my proposal. In a second chapter, more related with the practice adoption directly of the type of practices they use, like a different approach. It's like use this. If I understand well your question.
You also want to say your final remarks?
Yeah. It's like one will be this approach, and the other one will be this approach, to the facts adoption, and here the comparative between communities.
I would start checking practical adoptions over space and check if they are at the very least statistically different. No?
Mm-hmm.
You may get different numbers, but they're not statistically different. No? So I would start checking that.
Perfect. Well, do you have any kind of closing remarks?
No, thank you so much for your insight, for your questions. I know this is working in process. I just have a bunch of information. I'm trying to figure it out how to analyze and how to sort. So it's very helpful to see what are the things that are not clear, the thing that you need, the thing that I need to explore in a better way, or the different approaches that I can follow. So thank you so much for that. If you have any additional suggestion of things, or it's very appreciated that feedback. So.
Thank you so much.